Good evening, everyone. Today, the Adda session is by our uh, Abhisek Tibrewal, and he is going to take session on LGBT plus inclusion and allyship. So, and his batchmate Palashda is also here to moderate the session, and I also welcome him. So, over to Palashda and Abhishek for the session.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining, even though I cannot see most of you. Uh, Abhishek, thank you, Abhishek, first of all, for choosing me to moderate this session. हम लोग इसको टीबू के नाम से जानते थे विद्यापीठ में और he and I had joined in the same year. I remember 1993 I had joined few weeks late, but we had joined in the same year in class 6th. और अभिषेक का एक जो पेरेनियल अपना मुझे मेमोरी याद है कि इन द इनिशियल मंथ्स ही वाज ऑलवेज लिटिल बिट लॉस्ट एंड ऑलवेज क्राइंग, ही वाज ट्रिमेंडसली होमसिक. ऐसे कहानियां तो बहुत है, बट आई वुड नॉट लाइक टू टेक योर टाइम, बट लुकिंग बैक हम लोग अपने ही धुन में थे और सोचते थे क्यों इतना रोता रहता है. बट लुकिंग बैक अब मुझे लगता है कि अभिषेक हमारे बैच में शायद काफी सेंसिबल लड़का था. ही वाज क्वाइट मैच्योर फॉर हिज एज. ज्यादा चढ़ा नहीं रहा हूँ तेरे को तिब्रेवाल. फिर विद्यापीठ के बाद हम लोग मदर्स में गए सब लोग, और उन साल में मदर्स इंटरनेशनल में आई थिंक 10 या 11 बच्चे गए थे 11th 12th में, उसमें से 6 हमारे विद्यापीठ से थे. तो वी वर लिटिल बिट लाइक कि क्या है, कौन लोग आए एंड ऑल. एंड टिब्रेवाल ने कॉमर्स लिया था और इसके क्लास में बड़ी सुंदर लड़कियां थी और हम सबको काफी जलन होता था बिकॉज हम बॉयज स्कूल से गए थे ऑब्वियसली. काफी हम जेलस होते थे. only if we knew what we know now. After school, of course, we have kept touch off and on, not too much, but I know that he went to the university to study finance, and from there, he was, of course, one of the bright boys of the batch. He went to Ahmedabad, IIM Ahmedabad, and then joined HSBC. In HSBC, he started, of course, with his work, he also started a Pride chapter there to promote inclusion of the LGBTQ individuals. And then I just came to know very recently that he also took a sabbatical for 2 years from HSBC to work in an NGO in Bihar. And 2.5 years ago, he moved to Netherlands, and he's now working with ING, a well-known insurance and banking company. And there also he has, or additionally out of his work, he has set up something known as Rainbow Reform, an organization which basically counsels the LGBT people with, relationship, personal and inclusion issues. I think this is a very crucial discussion. I also came to Norway 9 years back, and I think I also became much more sensible about this topic after seeing a lot of my friends here. So I think it's a very important discussion, and hopefully all of us will leave with a little deeper understanding of the myths and perceptions and how we can be good allies to the LGBT community. Uh, I I think we will divide the session into half an hour for the presentation and half an hour for question and answers. But I think Tibrewal doesn't have any issue, right? That if someone wants to ask some very pressing question or some fundamental question for their own understanding. So welcome to do that. And also keep posting your questions on the chat box. And either me or Prashant, we will see, because I'll be sharing the presentation, so I cannot see much. So we will try to raise those questions from the chat box. Over to you, Tibrewal. Thank you all for joining again.
Thank you, Palash. Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on the time zone. Yes, it's very interesting. In fact, when this Adda message went out on the Facebook, one of my closest friends from RK Mission, Kumar Rahul, who is currently in US, he messaged me, Abhishek, how did you pull this off, doing an LGBT session under the mantle of RK Mission? And I told him that it's not me, but it's rather Ritesh Da, who took the initiative and asked me to do this. And while at times I was getting cold feet, he kept on pressing and encouraged me to go ahead with this session. So thank you, Riteshta, and all the members of Praktani committee for organizing this. I think besides just being a networking session and a knowledge sharing session, through these kind of initiatives, you're also helping build a better world brick by brick. So thank you so much. Yeah, and we'll now move on to the topic. But before I start talking about it, maybe good to just do a quick check on our level of understanding, and hence I start with a quiz. What is the full form of LGBTQIAP? Now, I think most of us know the full form of LGBT. It's in the media, but it will be interesting to see how many of us know what QIA and P stand for. So maybe if participants can start writing their replies in the chat. I hope nobody is doing a Google search. And since I don't see any response yet on the chat, it looks like people are actually Googling the answer. Okay, Gaurav, that's only five. What does IA and P stand for? Okay. Uh, if nobody knows the answer, then good that we are having this session. But I won't give the answer now. And we will probably move to the next slide. And then you will understand what these letters stand for and why they are important to know. Okay. Before the next slide, just a quick run through on the agenda. So we will be talking.
एलजीबीटीक्यू पे भाषण दे रहा है.
Sorry. Yeah. So we will start with the gender-bread person. Then I will walk you through the SOGI spectrum. Then we will talk about some myth versus reality regarding the LGBTQ population. Then we will also cover very briefly the history of LGBT movement in India and how it is being a LGBT plus person in India. And lastly, we will talk about what inclusion means, what allyship means, and why they're important. So yeah, next slide, please, Palash. Yeah. Now you see here, you see a very cute diagram of a very cute little man drawing our attention to the four attributes: sex, attraction, identity, and expression. Now, what do they mean? So, sex here refers to the biological sex with which a person is born. So, it could be male, it could be female, it could be intersex. Attraction here refers to your romantic, sexual, emotional attraction towards a person. It could be a person of the same sex, it could be a person of opposite sex, it could be a person of both the sexes, it could be to a person irrespective of their sex at all. The third one, which is identity, which is about your mind, refers to what you think of yourself. Do you think of yourself as a man? Do you think of yourself as a woman? Do you think of yourself as gender fluid? It doesn't matter whether you're a man or woman, or you move from one end to the other end of the spectrum. And lastly, the arrows onto the left hand of the diagram, that is the expression. That is your external appearance, how you behave, how you walk, how you communicate, whether it is masculine, feminine, or it is fluid, a mix of both. Now, why are these concepts important? Why is it important for us to understand these four attributes of sex, attraction, identity, and expression? Because these are very distinct and different, but traditionally, we are taught, groomed, and we grow up thinking of them as one attribute. We see the world as binary. If a person is male, we expect that person to be attracted towards females. We expect that person to think of himself as male. We expect that person to express himself in a certain masculine manner. Similarly, if a person's biological sex is female, we assume that that female is attracted towards men. We assume that female thinks of herself as a female and expresses herself in a certain feminine way. From childhood, we are taught to think and look at the world in a binary manner. It's night and day, it's black and white, it's good or bad, it's man or woman. But if you look closely, the world is not binary. Between night and day, we have dusk and dawn. And between black and white, there are thousand shades of gray. And the same applies to humanity. Between the traditional binary construct of a man and woman, with attraction, identity, and expression preconceived to be in a certain fashion, there are millions of people for whom sex, attraction, identity, and expression do not always align and follow the set pattern defined by the society. And hence, to be able to understand those people who are marginalized, who are on the fringes of the society, it is important to distinguish between these four attributes. Uh, Now let's move to the next slide so that we can see how these four attributes play out onto a spectrum so that we have people of all shades with all kind of orientations, identity and expressions. So first we look at the sex, the biological sex. Now traditionally we think of biological sex as only female and male, the two binary construct. But in between we have intersex. Uh, Intersex, I don't know if people understand or not, but intersex typically means people whose at birth the gonads or the genitalia are not fully developed to classify them either as a female or a male. Now, traditionally, doctors used to do surgery on these people to assign them either a female sex or a male sex artificially. But increasingly, thankfully, that trend is changing, and people choose to not parents choose for their intersex child not to have the sex surgery done at birth, rather let the child grow and then decide at a future age when he grows up, he or she grows up, whether they want to associate with female or male or they want to continue the way they were born with. Then we look at sexual orientation, which, if you recall from the previous slide, is the matter of heart. Now, again, traditionally, it is assumed that everyone is heterosexual, which means they are attracted to the person of opposite sex, which is on the right end of this spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is homosexual, where people are attracted to the person of the same sex, same biological sex. In between, again, we have, again, I said it's a spectrum, we have multiple options. There is bisexual, people who are attached or attracted to people of two sexes. We have pansexual, people who are attracted to people of all sexes, female, male, intersex, anything. And then we have asexual, people who are not attracted sexually at all towards anyone. So the world is not just heterosexual, but there's a whole range of other sexual orientation possibilities which exist. The third part is gender identity, which again, from the previous slide, the gender-bred person is the matter of mind. Now, we see the world as cisgender. So person who is male identifies as man. So he is a cisgender man. The other end of the spectrum is transgender, where a person born as a biological male identifies as a woman, or a person born as a biological female identifies as a male. We also have and what we call transgender. We also have people called genderqueer, and what that means, or gender fluid, means that they don't identify fully as a male or a female. It's fluid. There are days when they feel like male, there are days when they feel like female, or it does not matter to them what they identify as. And then the last in this spectrum is gender expression, which from the previous slide is the outward appearance of a person. Now, the society expects a man to behave in a masculine manner. What does it mean? It means how you walk. You walk with a big stride, your arms swinging by, your shoulders are squared up. Society expects a female to behave in a certain fashion, walk in a slightly different manner, talk in a slightly different tone of voice, dress differently, and so on. But again, those are changing. Now we talk about androgynous, which means that you behave in a combination of masculine and feminine manner, or gender neutral. It does not matter how you behave. And we see that changing. Fortunately, gender expression is something where the change is more visible because, again, gender expression is about outward appearance, so it is more visible. And we see that we have unisex stores these days. And in fact, there are models in the West who do ramp walk both for men's clothing and female clothing. So clearly, gender expression is something where society seems to be more aware of the changes and is more catching up. I guess it was obvious I didn't mention it at the beginning, but SOGI spectrum refers to that: sex, orientation, gender identity, and expression. Now, traditional view is that a person born as a biological male is attracted to a female, thinks of himself as a man, and behaves in a manly manner. And at the other end, a person born as a biological female is her sexual orientation is towards male. She identifies as a woman and she behaves in a womanly manner. Now, these are the two possibilities which the world recognizes traditionally. But if you look at with these four attributes and each attribute having multiple options, you can have a person with any permutation combination. It can be a female whose orientation is pansexual, who identifies as genderqueer, behaves in a masculine manner. It can be an intersex person who is bisexual, who identifies as a woman, behaves in an androgynous manner. So, using these four attributes and the various possibilities under them, you can have hundreds of possibilities with which a person can want to live their life, the person associates with. But we see the world only in two brackets, and that is the straight or the heteronormative concept. Why do we do that? Because more than 90% of people fit those two definitions, and all the hundreds of possibilities account for less than 10% of population. And so that part is ignored, that part is not visible. uh, I hope the concepts are clear so far. If yes, then let's move
I
to.
have one question, Tibrewal, if you don't mind me asking. Can you hear me?
Yeah, certainly, Palash, go
Yeah,
on.
how is there any like what is the current thoughts or research about is it possible like if someone is confused, is it possible to really kind of determine the sexual orientation of gender identity or anything? Is there any thoughts on social science in social science or something about this or science?
Okay, so in fact, a lot of people say that the Q in LGBTQIAP stand for questioning, which means that the person is not clear either about their gender identity or orientation or expression, and that is perfectly normal. In many cases, the questioning arises because you know you feel differently, you know that you are different, but you are not sure about it because the society has taught you from childhood to be in a certain fashion. And hence there is a questioning phase when you really wonder if are you really different or what you can do about it. So honestly, there is no set way in which you can determine the orientation or gender identity of a person. It's up to each individual to figure out what their orientation is, what their identity is. And honestly, I believe that subconsciously people are aware. It is just a matter of self acceptance and having that courage and confidence to accept it publicly, which is where people lack and people are confused at times.
Uh, uh. So is it the teenage years or even before that they start to feel
Even
that they are different?
even before that, research suggests that when it comes to gender identity, people realize it as early as 8.5 years old, and sexual orientation people realize 9 and 10 or maybe 11 years old. People realize
Mm,
that their orientation or identity are different.
mm,
But again, it takes a lot of time before people accept it and are able to speak
mm,
about it or talk about it or come out. And in many
mm,
cases,
mm,
that people live in closet their entire life.
mm.
In fact, thank you,
Yeah.
Palash, for the interjections because this
Mm.
made me realize that I didn't explain the full form of the uh, acronym earlier. So
No,
I guess,
it's all right. Mm,
yeah, let me do that before we move to the next slide. So LGBTQIAP+, L stands for lesbian, which is females having an sexual attraction towards other females. G stands for gay, which is males having a sexual attraction for male. B stands for bisexual, which is people attracted to two sexes. T stands for transgender, where a biological male identifies as a woman or a biological woman identifies as a man. Q is the umbrella term, which stands for queer, which is the umbrella term for covering the entire LGBT plus spectrum. But nowadays, people say that Q also stands for questioning, which we just talked about. I stands for intersex, where people are born with the not clearly developed reproductive organs, to assign them a biological male or a female sex at time of birth. And research says that 1 in 5,000 child is born like that. So it's not a very small number if you think about it. A stands for asexual, where people do not have sexual attraction towards people of any sex. Important to note that asexual people do develop romantic and emotional attachment towards other people. It is only the sexual attraction part which is missing. P stands for pansexual, where people can get sexually attracted towards any person irrespective of their sex. And in fact, even after P, we have a plus. Because again, as we discussed in the SOGI spectrum, you can have hundreds of possibilities by combining the four attributes in any fashion. Okay, now before we move to the next, another quiz question. Let's say somebody comes out to you as a LGBT plus person, and your response is, "Thank you, I respect your choice." Is this the right response or the wrong response? Please feel free to speak or mention in the chat. And don't worry about a right or wrong answer, it does not matter. We are all here to learn something.
Shiva, can you please repeat the question?
So
The
somebody
voice
comes
is-
out, your friend comes out to you and says that, hey, he is not straight, but he's gay. And you tell him, great, thank you, I respect your choice. Is it okay to say that? Is it right? Is it wrong?
Wondering why to say thank you. I respect your choice
Because
seems okay.
Yeah, right.
you have no idea what kind of things people say. Maybe we'll talk about it later. But yeah, thank you is nice. You are saying thank you because your friend confided in you. He trusted you enough to tell you, right?
Mm, that's right.
Come on, people, it will be great to hear some answers or read some answers. Let's try to make it interactive. Let's participate. Maybe
I
Ritesh
think
or
that would
Abhishek
be right.
will
I
send you
think
a
that
gift
would be
at
right.
your address.
Now that you ask it in the presentation, it seems it may not be quite right to ask this, but maybe you can expand on that. I think if we haven't heard anything in the chat box.
Yeah, it looks like everyone is silent. I don't even know if other people are listening or not, or they're just logged in here because there is
Probably they
kind
are
of,
thinking how to react by such a
or maybe they're worried
question
about wrong
comes.
answer. Uh, I'm not.
I think it would be right, like
I'm not a
without
teacher
judging.
from RK Mission. I'm not gonna punish anyone for a wrong answer. You won't be
I
asked
think
to
it would
kneel
be
down
right.
with a rap on your knuckles. Okay, let's move on, and we will cover this.
Ritesh
Yes,
da is
I think it's not right to say thank you. I respect your choice because if I'm heterosexual, no one comes and says to me, thank you. I respect your choice for heterosexual. That's number one. And number two, respect your choice. Personally, I feel when we put these sentences or words, we already have a kind of we think in our mind or society there is a division. You know, if we are fully in sync with each other as a community or as a human being, I need not thank anyone for their sexual identity or whatever. That's my personal view.
thank you, Ritesh. Thank you so much for speaking out. Yeah, let's move to the next slide, Palash, and we will look at some of the myths which surround the LGBT plus community. As I think I mentioned in the earlier slide that more than 90% of world population falls under the two binary construct of male and female as understood by society, and less than 10% fall under the LGBT plus spectrum. So obviously, they are marginalized and much less understood by the majority, and that gives rise to a lot of stereotypes. Now, I've listed down here a few common stereotypes. I don't think I'll cover all of them in detail, but maybe just discuss four or five these in slightly more detail. And yeah, people can read the rest. And if there are any questions they want to discuss, we can always take them during the Q&A part. First, let's talk about choice. In the previous slide, in the question, the person said, "I respect your choice." Why it is wrong? It is certainly not right for the simple reason that sexual orientation is not a choice. Come to think about it, if by virtue of your sexual orientation you are marginalized, you do not have the basic human rights, uh, why will somebody choose to become a homosexual person? If I talk about my personal experiences, I mean, it took me a lot of years and a lot of time to accept myself for who I am. I mean, there were years when I cried myself to bed every night. I prayed to God every day that please change me, convert me into a heterosexual person because life was so miserable trying to hide my orientation, trying to pretend to be a straight male, trying to pretend that I have a girlfriend. Uh, it's not easy leading a dual life every moment of your waking life, every moment of your breath. When I came out to my parents, my dad took me to clinics all over the country, Bombay, Bangalore, Hyderabad, even to US to consult doctors to see if there's a cure to change from homosexual behavior to heterosexual behavior. So given the whole challenges around leading a life as a gay or a lesbian or a bisexual person, why will somebody choose intentionally, willingly to be a homosexual person? It is not a matter of choice at all. And hence saying someone that I respect your choice triggers a lot of emotions and thoughts in that person who has obviously underwent a lot of trauma from childhood because he or she was different. So if it is not choice, then what is it? Then what determines your sexual orientation? Again, science is not out on this. Scientists, for years, scientists have been searching for that elusive gay gene, which determines a person's homosexual behavior. Few years ago, scientists had a eureka moment and they thought they have identified that one specific gene which causes homosexual tendencies. In subsequent years, they found more genes. And then they found that there's a complex interplay of various genes which determines the human sexual orientation. So, honestly, when it comes to scientific evidence, scientists do agree that it is genetic, but the interplay of various genes is so complex that they don't have a full mapped out chart on how it plays out and what exactly causes it. But overwhelming evidence suggests that it is entirely genetic. It's a biological factor. It is not something which you cook up, which you just think and it happens. Many people also say that it is environment. It is how your parents raised you, and hence it is your parents' fault or your immediate surrounding, your relatives, your friends that you turned out to be homosexual or different. But again, as I said, uh, environment could only affect you in terms of giving you that education or that strength or that courage to accept who you are and maybe come out more. Now, typically, what happens is that people see that majority people who have come out as gay or lesbian, they are from a particular section of society, a certain bracket with a certain education level, with a certain wealth level. And then they start thinking that it is the environment which caused that person to be gay or lesbian. But causality is not proved. As I said, research clearly suggests it is genetic, it is not environment, it is not how you were raised. Many people also think it is just a phase. You will grow out of it. Or maybe you went to a boys' school and you became homosexual, you became gay. But once you start meeting girls, this will change. By virtue of saying it is just a phase, you think it is a lifestyle. You again think it is a choice. And as I said, it is not a choice. It is hardwired into your being, the person you are, deep down at the genetic level. So it's not a phase, it's not a lifestyle, it's not a choice at all. I think a couple of years ago, a video went viral on social media of two gay lions in Kenya jungles. Subsequently, over the years, biologists have identified 450 different species who exhibit homosexual tendencies. And that is a answer into the face of people who believe that LGBT plus tendencies are unnatural. If it is unnatural, then only human beings, who are the only sapient creatures, will make that choice to do something unnatural. Other animals don't have that intellect to choose between natural or unnatural. They just go by the animal instinct, which is at the very core of somebody's being. So if 450 species exhibit homosexual tendencies, then certainly it is wrong to say it is unnatural behavior. Some people also say that LGBT plus people are very flamboyant, but I think that is a case of victim bashing. There is a whole history of bullying, shaming, guilt with which LGBT people grow up with. And so, obviously, at a later age in life, when they come out, when they have the courage and confidence to accept themselves and publicly speak about it, they express themselves a bit more boldly than most other people do. So, I don't think it is about flamboyance. It is just about your right to self-expression. I guess I've covered 4 5 key myths here. Uh, I leave. I won't discuss all of these here. I think most of them are interrelated. You can probably just take a minute to read them. But if anyone has a question on any particular myth or they have any other doubt regarding stereotypes about LGBT plus people, please feel free to ask question and I'll be happy to take it.
ये मीत से याद आया टिबू, हमारे माइथोलॉजी में भी काफी कैरेक्टर्स है ना, कुछ एग्जांपल्स भी शायद तू दे सकता है.
Yes.
Where our ancient epics and texts are also covered about this community.
Yes. Good question, Balash. And in fact, in various other discussions in other forums where I've talked about it, I've always had a slide on Indian mythology. But here, this was a short session of half an hour, so obviously I cut it out. Uh, I will start with the most popular one from Mahabharat, Shikhandi or Shikhandini. Uh, she was born as a female because in the previous birth as Amba, she took a vow to be born and kill Bhishma. And she was born as Shikhandini. But her father, King Drupad, raised her as a boy and trained her so that she can grow up and become a warrior to kill Bhishma. She was also married to a female because, as I said, Drupad raised her as a boy, even though she was born as a female. And in the wedding night, her wife found out that her husband is not a male but a female, and her wife left him. And then she continued ran away from the palace. And in the jungle, he met a yaksha who changed her into a male. And then Shikhandi became Shikhandi. So, is this an example of a gender surgery or sex surgery, sex reassignment surgery happening in the ancient India? We don't know, but that's what the story says. We also know about Arjuna. He was cursed by the he was cursed by Urvashi in Swarg to become a third gender for a year, and that story is well documented in Mahabharata. Less known are examples of the sea gods Varun and Mitra. For people who don't know, we have two sea gods, Varuna and Mitra. Varuna is more popularly known because Varuna is the god of the upper regions of the sea, and Mitra is the god of the deeper regions of the sea. Varuna and Mitra are portrayed into various paintings and sculptures as two men riding a chariot together. And they, I think, in some regional folklores, there are stories about them together giving birth to a child through Ayoni. Yoni means vagina, and so Ayoni means without vaginal intercourse. So we have the, sorry, yeah. Uh, we also have the story about Agni, god of fire. He had a wife called Swaha, and he also has a husband called Soma. So maybe Agni is bisexual, we don't know. But clearly, Indian mythology, regional folklores, our Puranas, Vedas are full of examples where gods have exhibited gender fluidity. For example, Vishnu became Mohini, and so on. And Shiva actually fell for Mohini. where gods have exhibited transgender tendencies, where gods have changed their gender depending on the situation. There are homoerotic counters, there are bisexual relationships. So our mythology is full of many such examples. And that also makes us wonder that if Indian mythology was so accepting of LGBT plus community, so much so that even gods, yakshas, and everyone, there are examples, then what happened? We don't know what happened. We do know that as early as 700 years ago, in 13th century, when the Konark temple was being built near Puri in Orissa, they made sure that sculptures on the temple walls exhibited many sculptures of sexual encounters, and some of those sculptures are homoerotic. Some of the sculptures depict orgies. Some of the sculptures depict gay relationships, lesbian relationships, pansexual relationships. The sculptures depicting sex on the Konark temple walls are not pure straight examples. And that was 13th century, barely 700 or 800 years ago. So we do know that till few hundred years ago, Indian society was far more accepting, but somewhere in the last 500 600 years, things changed. Was it the advent of Islam? Was it the British Victorian mentality and the prudishness which came with it? We don't know. Section 377, which criminalized intercourse against the nature of against the order of nature, is certainly a was certainly a British legacy, which fortunately we have done away with recently.
Excellent. Or I have one more question, like how do we deal? This is more from a practical point of view, and so that we don't embarrass ourselves. How are the pronouns like? How do we address? Because I come across and it's little bit confusing, isn't it? Can you shed
Yeah,
some light on that? The pronouns that we use for different people, like people with different gender identity and expression, and yeah, if they
sure.
have, of course, have come out and they know what they are.
Certainly, certainly. So again, in the traditional English grammar, we have two pronouns, he and she,
Mm,
corroborate to the two binary construct of a male and a
mm,
female. But as we discussed, if on the spectrum people have different biological sex besides male and female, if people have different gender identities, then
mm,
obviously the two straight-jacketed pronouns as he or she will not accommodate everyone. And that's why today people say that we are free to choose our own pronoun.
mm,
So
mm,
it
mm,
can be they, it can be z, it can be z, it can be anything. People choose their own pronoun depending on how they feel. I think the right
mm,
thing to do is not to assume. Because again, when we start addressing people as either he or she, we are forcing them into the two binary construct of
mm,
straight male and straight female.
mm,
He refers to a straight male, she refers to a straight female.
mm,
But if people think, if people are different,
mm.
then she is not sufficient. So the right thing to do is ask the person what pronoun they are comfortable with and address them using those pronouns.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I
Mm,
think, social media platform these days give an option to add your pronoun. It is visible along with your display pic and your display name on the profile. So yes, if you're connected with your friends on social media, you can easily see what pronoun they prefer. Okay, should we move on to the next slide?
I think Intizar has one question. Uh, have you taken it, Abhishek?
What is the question?
Intizar, maybe you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Actually, the question is, I wanted to ask, what about the demisexuality? Is it a part of the spectrum or not?
Everything is part of the spectrum. Even the straight male and straight female are part of the spectrum. So by demisexuality, I think you mean people who feel sexual attraction only after they have developed an emotional connection, right? So
Right,
emotional connection precedes a sexual uh, attraction, right?
right.
Yes. Uh, so what does LGBT plus a spectrum does? It says that there are not only two definitions, there are various possibilities. So everything falls in the spectrum, from straight to gay to any combination you can think of. Does that answer your question, Intizar?
Yeah, yeah.
Because again, in the traditional sense, people don't always think in the straight concept that an emotional companionship precedes sexual attraction. In a straight world heteronormative concept, you will get sexually attracted towards a person of opposite sex even without an emotional connection. And demisexuality to a certain extent challenges that notion and says that romantic attachment and sexual attachment could be two different things. There are people who feel sexually attracted but without romantic attachment. There are people who develop a romantic attachment but don't have sexual feelings, which is asexual. And there are people like demisexual who have romantic attachment first and sexual attraction follows. Okay, thanks, Antizar. Interesting question. Yeah. Now let's talk about India. Now, obviously, people of LGBT from LGBT plus have existed all throughout from the time human beings have been in existence. But whatever happened last few hundred years in India, there was a lot of social stigma attached to this concept. And so, what would say a gay person do? Typically, a gay person, many gay person who cannot think about leading a heteronormative family life would leave their home, join an ashram, and try to find succor in spirituality. There are many people who would be forced to marry and lead a heteronormative life against their wishes. There are people who faced police brutalities, which I think was a lesser concern compared to the brutality they faced against from their own family members. But in the modern history, I think things began to change from 1984 when Ashok Rokavi became the first Indian person to come out as a gay man. And LGBT plus gradually started entering Indian mainstream dialogue. In 1994, first NGOs supporting LGBT plus people came into existence. Humsafar Trust in Mumbai and Nas Foundation in Delhi. And in 1999, we had the first Pride March in India in Kolkata at Park Maidan. Uh, Humsafar Trust, Nas Foundations, and the various other LGBT groups joined hands and filed a petition in High Court to read down Section 377. In 2009, Delhi High Court came out with the verdict, and Section 377 was read down. Unfortunately, the petitioners who were not happy with the reading down, they filed a case in Supreme Court, and in 2013, Supreme Court brought it back into existence. I still remember the period between 2009 and 2013 when after the High Court verdict, a lot of in Bandra a shop came up only catering to LGBT focused goods and paraphernalia. A couple of hotels in India, in Rajasthan and Kerala, started advertising themselves as a LGBT friendly hotels. 2013 came, the shop in Bandra shut down. And again, you stopped seeing these advertisements of rainbow travel groups, etc. But fortunately, Supreme Court, a five-bench Supreme Court, picked it up again. And in 2018, Supreme Court again read down Section 377. I remember in RK Mission, Kanak Shankar Mukherjee or Kanakda taught us civics. And in one of the classes, he told us that law is expected to move ahead of society. And only when law is ahead of society, then we gradually evolve into a more progressive and modern society. And the Supreme Court's reading down of Section 377 is a classic example of that. Sashi Tharoor submitted a personal, I don't know what is the exact term there, but he proposed a private member bill in Parliament to decriminalize and read down Section 377, I think in 2014 or 2015. That bill was shot down by a 74 to 21 vote, which shows that more than 75% of society was in India is not ready to accept uh, reading down or cancellation of Section 377. But Supreme Court did that, and hence, as I said, it's a classic case of what Kanakda taught us, that law is ahead of society. But fortunately, the good part is that society is catching up. Traditionally, what used to happen, and let me take the example of trans people or people whose expression Again, if you go back to the earlier slide, I'm talking about gender identity and gender expression here. For trans people, the change that they are different from the heteronormative world is very visible. And so typically transgender people are thrown out of their homes. Have you ever wondered why transgender people live in groups, live in clusters, in impoverished parts of the city on the fringes of the society away from the mainstream world? A transgender person is also born out of the womb of a mother, but where are their parents? Why do they live in groups with other transgender people? What about their siblings? Where are they? I don't think anybody wonders about it. But if you think about it, it's the answer is in your face. Because the moment transgender people attain puberty and it becomes evident to the parent that their child is different, they fear the backlash from society and they turn them out of their homes. And so transgender people grow away from their family, their parents, their siblings, and they find other transgender people with whom they live and spend the rest of their life. For cisgender people, and cis again is people who identify with the same sex with which what they are born with, the external manifestations are not very obvious. And so for a cisgender gay person or a cisgender lesbian person, the challenges maybe we can say are relatively less compared to a transgender person. But even then, as I mentioned with my own example earlier, every moment you're trying to hide yourself. Let's take an example. We go to offices, right? And most people have a picture of their partner, their spouse on their office desk. But a gay or a lesbian person in India will not have a picture of their loved one on their desk. People go on holidays with their partners, with their family. They come back and they proudly show the pictures to their office colleagues. I went to Sikkim during summers and see this is the picture of me and my girlfriend, me and my partner. But when a gay or a lesbian person go to holiday and when they come back and their office colleagues tell them, please show us pictures, they have to make excuses. They can't share that. So things which a straight person takes as granted, which is part of day-to-day normal conversation, for LGBT plus people, those conversations are difficult. They have to find excuses. They have to think on their feet on how to avoid answering those questions without getting suspicions aroused in other people that they are different. Growing up as gay or lesbian or any other option on the spectrum, you are bullied, you are shamed, you walk on the street, people name call you. So, day to day activities, day to day leading your life is a challenge. Research suggests that sexual abuse incidence is 3 to 5 times higher for LGBT plus people. More than 54% of gay boys in India are sodomized or sexually abused before they are 15 years old. So clearly, as a community, as well as an individual, there's a lot of social trauma which people grow up with. And that's why the incidence of mental disorders, anxiety, depression, or suicidal tendencies is about 300% times greater for LGBT plus people than straight people. Mainstream media, Bollywood, for example, also does not help. For many, many years, gay people were portrayed in Bollywood by a caricature of with Bolly Darling playing the lead role. And those caricatures further promote the stereotype and the myths which people associate with LGBT plus people. Fortunately, in last few years, we are seeing some winds of change. We had movies like Kapoor and Sons, Shubh Mangal Jada, Shavdhan, etc., Badhai Do, which came out, which had a more realistic and sensitive portrayal of LGBT plus people. Law has caught up. Society is changing gradually, slowly, but yeah, we still have miles to go before we can say that India is a really inclusive society. Yeah. Can we move to the next slide, Palash? So, what does inclusion mean? We just talked about India needs to become a more inclusive society for LGBT plus people. Inclusion is just about embracing people irrespective of differences, be it differences of race, gender, ability, sexual orientation, identity, anything. It is about giving equal opportunities to everyone. What do human beings want? We all want pursuit of happiness. We want right of freedom, right of privacy, right of self-expression. but these are denied to the marginalized people. As I mentioned, LGBT plus people, day-to-day activities like holding hands of a partner and walking together, putting a picture of your partner, sharing that is not possible. You can't marry, you can't have children, you can't live together with your partner. You can't take a house on lease together. You can't take a loan or buy a house in the joint name. The basic rights which everybody takes for granted are denied to LGBT plus people. Everybody wants to thrive. Everybody wants to contribute to the society, to the community, or to the organization you work for. And you want to be valued for the contribution you make. But again, LGBT plus people are discriminated in offices. There's those, even in metro cities where people are so-called more educated, more aware, there is name falling behind back of people. Uh, and these things are not myths, they happen every day in everyday life. But if businesses become more inclusive, either through policy, by having strict policy against homophobia, and by having policies where they use gender neutral words, where they recognize not just spouse, but also partner, including same sex partner, through advocacy, through providing training and support to employee and staff, businesses can attract more people. As I said, slightly less than 10% of world population is LGBT plus. If you have a more diverse setup, you attract better talent. If you allow people to be who they are, they can be more productive, more efficient, and that will ultimately help the corporates. And even for businesses, again, research shows that the average income of gay and lesbian people is higher than straight people, and what is typically termed as pink dollars by economists. So if as a business, if you're seen as LGBT plus friendly, you get a dedicated market which you can target too. And again, due to a shared history of violence and marginalization, LGBT plus people have a natural affinity to support businesses which are LGBT friendly. And so it is not just about being a good person, being a good corporate, it is also about profits here. So inclusion can actually help you achieve that. Now, as an okay, Palas, next slide, please. And I think that will be the last one. Uh, as an individual, you can be an ally. Now, who is an ally? Somebody who supports and encourages LGBT plus people around them. To be a good ally, first you have to recognize your privilege. And here by privilege, I don't mean wealth or education. Here by privilege, I mean the basic fact that you were born into the majority of the human section, which is the straight male or straight female. And that gives you the all the rights, all the basics, the freedom, self-expression, the right to lead your life with dignity. Everything comes naturally to the straight section, but for LGBT plus people, that is not easily available. And that is the basic privilege. And only if you understand as a straight person that we have these privileges, which 7-8% of population do not have, then you can develop that empathy, that compassion, and that understanding of LGBT plus world. And only then you can really be a good ally. How to be a good ally? You have to learn to listen. Let the person who is talking to you about their experiences set the tone. Don't interject. Listen patiently. Try to understand. If they say something, don't assume. If they say they are gay, don't assume that their gender identity is different. If you have doubts, ask. Read up more about the subject, attend training programs, understand. Because it is possible that every 12th person you interact with is LGBT plus person. Very important is to be visible in your support. If you can, in office, wear a rainbow lanyard or have something, because then it becomes obvious to LGBT plus people that you're an ally, and they will feel emboldened, or more, they will be more confident of approaching and talking to you about their personal experiences or challenges. And most importantly, when you see homophobia around you, challenge it, question it, fight for it. If I just take some statistics, red-haired people are less than 2% of world population. Lefties are less than 10% of population. But people don't discriminate against people just because they have red hair or they're lefty. But people discriminate against LGBT plus people, even though they are almost 8% of section. So it is important to understand these, and that's how you can be a good ally. Next slide, Valash. I guess that's it from me. I just wanted to leave you guys with this quote and thought that being LGBT plus is not an abnormality. It is just being in minority.
Excellent. Bravissimo. Tibrewal, nice presentation, and you have actually covered uh, the topic so well. It was also I learned something from this presentation today. Just I have one question before I think we don't have much time, but I'm thinking in a boys' school like ours, like RKMV, for example, which is of course backed by certain values. And you said that this kind of, this sexual orientation, gender identity might start already when one is 8 and 9 years old. And we are in very formative years in Vidyapit in terms of psyche building. How this can be, like, how this issue can be addressed without creating too much problem? Or what, do you have any views on that? How we can tackle this?
Uh, I think the problem is more wider than just about LGBT plus. It is about the
Yeah,
basic lack of sexual education,
of
and it is
course.
not just about Vidyapit, but it is about the wider education system in India, where sexual education is not covered in detail.
Mm, mm,
We were lucky; we had Pandey sir, RSP sir, who did
mm,
cover it in some detail in Standard 9, but he went beyond the curriculum.
mm,
And
mm,
the curriculum doesn't cover it. I don't think even our teachers are trained on this subject.
mm.
I will not take it as a limited question about RK Mission and a boys' school and how RK Mission is perceived to be more conservative since it is run by a Hindu monastery.
Oh,
Interestingly, sorry, I'm digressing, but I just remember Ashok Rokavi also, when he realized he's gay. Ashok Rokavi, as I mentioned earlier, is the first Indian to come out as a gay man. He joined Ramakrishna Ashram because as
mm,
a young adult, he could not face being a gay and he was worried and he didn't know how to lead his life. He joined Ramakrishna Mission in Bombay. And then one of the senior monks there encouraged him to leave the organization, live his life as a gay person, and help change the world. And he left the mission. He came out as gay, and he set up NGO to promote inclusion for LGBT plus people. Anyway,
mm,
back to the question. So I think sexual education needs to be covered. Number one. Number two, I think the stereotypes have to be challenged. So why do all storybooks talk about a prince charming rescuing a princess? I'm not saying
mm,
don't do that. Have a prince and a princess story because 90% of world falls under that bucket.
mm,
But 10% of world does not. So along with a prince and princess story, maybe also good to have a prince and prince or a princess and princess story at times.
mm,
And I think it is changing to some extent. I think 2 years ago, again, my friend messaged me from US. Hey, my daughter just borrowed a book from the school library. She was barely 8 years old. And he sent me the picture of that book, and it was the story of a prince and a prince.
mm,
So good to see that, yes, in some countries, in some libraries, in some schools, we don't have only stereotypical books, but we also have books which advance the concept from the binary construct. But I think these instances are few and far between, and we need more wider acceptance of these concepts.
Thank you. And money moves everything in the world. How big is this pink economy? Do you have a number? Is there an assigned number to that in billions or trillions of dollars?
Yeah, there should be. Typically, the research says that the LGBT plus population has an average income which is 20 to 30% greater than the straight community. Uh,
Mm,
it is associated to certain stereotypes because it is assumed and understood that LGBT plus people are more creative, so they flourish
mm,
in certain industries. I think it is not about being more creative. It is about, since they don't identify with the binary construct, they see the world as a spectrum.
mm,
See more colors, they see more shades, and so obviously that encourages creativity in their mind. They don't see the world in the duality form; they see it in totality because they are part of that. So since the binary construct are less obvious to them, so maybe they become more creative. To be an artist, you have to open your eyes a bit more than normal people, right?
mm,
And
mm,
that applies to LGBT plus people, not by choice as an option, but they're forced because they live in that setting.
mm, mm,
I just remembered something since you talked about RK Mission. Our junior Satyansh and Devanshu, who are part of Bollywood now, they wrote a poem called Ishki Izazat. And Huma Qureshi, the famous actress, she did a voiceover and they made a video out of it, which is on YouTube. I think it's a very, very sensitive portrayal of the struggles of LGBT plus people and why they need to be accepted. If it is okay, let me see if I can find it. I can post the link on YouTube. It's a short video, 5 minute, very interesting video, very lovely poem. Maybe good for people to watch it if you haven't seen it already. Let me find the link. Just 1 second. I will post it on the chat. Yes, I got it. I think somebody got a question. PT.
Hi, Bhaiya. This is another Tibrewal here.
Hi,
So,
Prashant.
yeah. So, thanks for all the insights. Certainly, even after so much exposure, this was good learning. And the question I have is about because you mentioned it's believed to be genetic. The sexual orientation is believed to be genetic, and I'm curious: aren't there any possibilities, or is it well established that it's genetic? Meaning, is there a case, is there a possibility where, let's say, a boy or a girl has been cheated on, or whatever social situation they may have, and either because of that shock or because of that mental conditioning, they were born straight, but they converted to gay or a lesbian?
It is certainly possible. Till about 10 years back, scientists believe that environment plays a big role in deciding your sexual orientation. It is only in the last 10, 12 years that genetic evidence has started coming to light. There are recorded evidence and cases of people who led their life as a straight person, visibly happy without any internal conflict, and then at a certain point in time, they switched from one orientation to other. What caused it? Was it environment? Whether the gay genes were suppressed and then they
Mhm.
started how do I say, expressing themselves more strongly in their body later on, we don't know. Mm, Science needs some more time, I guess, more research before answers can be found. But what matters is that it does not matter you were born straight or gay. As a person, at any point of time, the way you feel comfortable to lead your life, the way you associate yourself, you should have you should have freedom to live your life like that.
Right. No, thanks. Thank you. Just, it was more around whether it's only genetic or it could either be social and genetic.
Honestly, I don't know, and I guess nobody knows.
Right. Thanks.
But it is certainly known that it is extremely hardwired, and that's why all the treatments and the cures do not work. There's no evidence that they work. They certainly didn't work for me also. They do not work for sure. And when people are forced to do that, the resultant mental trauma, depression is very, very severe, many cases leading to suicides. So I guess if something causes a person to take the extreme step of committing suicide, then I guess we know that something is wrong in what we were doing earlier.
अभिषेक but then you showed a picture, वो जो डॉल का एक पिक्चर था,
हाँ,
उसमें आपने दिखाया कि towards the brain वो उनका जो इंटेलेक्ट जो
I-
सोचते हैं,
Hmm.
so then that means कि our thought process and everything is like genetic तो रहता ही है, but environmental भी mostly रहता है. So I think uh, because how they identify is comes from the mind as per your that diagram. तो उसको genetic I don't know, like identification and genetic things, how do we relate that?
uh, Let me ask you a counter question. Does a person of 8 year really understand that? But
No.
typically, it has been found in people who identify as a person of different sex than biological sex that they begin realizing it as early as at the age of 8. Uh, it's too early in the life of a person, the first 8 years, to say that in the first 8 years they changed their identity. And given they start expressing as early as at the age of 8, it seems it is hardwired from birth in the person. If people start expressing their gender identity at a later age, then I would understand your question better that yes, maybe it is environment. But given it happens at a very early age, the possibility of environment playing a role there is diminished.
Right.
Typically, research says 8, but I know, Palash mentioned I have a company called Rainbow Reform, and where we do counseling for LGBT plus people. And in my counseling interactions, I've come across people who said, and again, I'm talking about only gender identity here, that people born as boys started cross-dressing, applying their mom's makeup, and trying to drape a sari as early as at the age of 6.
Excellent. I think if we don't have further question, we've already exceeded time. I was thinking, how are we going to fill all this time? But see here, we are already 1 hour plus. I'd like to thank all the organizers for giving this space for this discussion. And Tibrewal, thank you for, enlightening all of us here. I feel pity for the people who couldn't join this important discussion today, but I think they'll post a video there in a wider group. So, yeah. Thank you. Then I give over to the organizer or to Ritesh Da or someone just to conclude, to make the concluding remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Palashda, and thank you, Abhishek, for such a session. Though the time was limited, and this topic needs to be discussed a lot more and to be understood more and make people more accommodative about this thing. I know a few friends who maybe scientific research is going on, but then public health and the psychological, this research also needs to be done. And one of my friends who was doing a PhD in this regarding the substance abuse in gender minority and sexual orientation minority community. So I think more and more research needs to be done, and people needed to be understand. I also was not aware like the hardwiring thing you told. It can be genetic or maybe environmental, whatever may be the reason. That hardwiring thing, it's very difficult for all of us to understand that thing. So if we discuss more and more and try to recognize more and more people with that, then only we will be able to understand these things. So thank you, Abhishek Da and Palash Da, for this session. And we will post this on our YouTube channel also, and across other platforms we will be sharing. So I think it will reach to a greater audience also. Thank you again. And I'd like to stop the recording.
Round of applause for Tibrewal.
Thank you, Palash, for helping me with it.
Chal,
And now I will stop the recording and maybe informal session will continue. And if you want to have informal chat, we can continue.
Sure. Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
can do that.